There is a condition that exists that has been covertly plaguing the lives of billions of people around the world. This condition is creating a zombie nation of delusion and degeneracy, a true form of dis-ease that has proliferated among populations, programming the destruction of dreams and lives. How many of you know what a parasocial relationship is? It is very real and quite common. It is usually termed a one-sided relationship in which a person invests attention, time, and emotional energy into a persona, and that other party has no idea that person exists. Let me give you another condition that exists as a result of incessant social media engagement. And that is the condition of the false dream, a deluded dream. For example, how many of you have found yourself doing something just for the sake of a social media post? How many of you have found yourself removing a social media post because it didn't get enough likes? Or maybe you took down a post due to a negative comment or two. But worse than all that, how many of you have found yourself experiencing something that you saw someone else on social media experience, to find out that you really didn't enjoy the experience or the price you paid for it? And that is what's called chasing someone else's dream. But there is something else that is happening unbeknownst to many. It is slowing people down. It is making them tired. It is limiting brain function. It is causing a lack of motivation or drive to do anything. People just don't give a crap anymore. It is lowering sex drive a lot. It makes people anxious and throws people into extreme emotional swings. And nobody can sleep. People are becoming more introverted, as you may have noticed. Interestingly enough, many people are experiencing these symptoms which mimic ADD. And that is dopamine depletion. But there is a solution. You just need to know the truth. Now, how many of you felt that dopamine hit right before the intro and the music kicked in anticipation of it? First, we need to understand what something is before we understand how it works. So, what is dopamine? Dopamine is a neurotransmitter. There are about 60 distinct neurotransmitters, with probably more that have yet to be identified. Dopamine is the neurotransmitter that is studied most extensively. They call it the pleasure chemical. Although it does serve other functions, it is responsible for motivation, decision-making, memory, reward processing, movement, attention learning, and it is also associated, of course, with neuropsychiatric disorders. It's associated with schizophrenia, Parkinson's disease, ADD and ADHD, addiction, and other disorders. Now, dopamine is like a hormone, except hormones are in the blood, and dopamine travels through the nervous system and the blood. So you could call it a neurohormone. It is a very special neurotransmitter anyway. Now, here is something that you won't hear many people mention, and that is this. Does anyone know where dopamine comes from? Well, let's go slow. In order for your body to produce anything, it needs what? It needs fuel. It needs nutrients. It needs food. Let's just start there. Let's stay with me. I'm going somewhere with this. Now, everyone pay close attention because this is very important, and I'm going to try and explain this the best I can. There are amino acids, which are the building blocks of proteins. There are essential amino acids and non-essential. Essential meaning that your body has to get those amino acids from food. Of the 9 essential amino acids is phenylalanine. That is what your body uses to produce dopamine. It takes the phenylalanine into the liver where it is hydroxylated into another amino acid called tyrosine. Now you can get tyrosine in certain foods, but we'll get to that. Now we have a 2-step process where the tyrosine is converted into another amino acid called L-DOPA. And L-DOPA is then converted to dopamine, which is released by the brain and the adrenal glands, which rest on top of the kidneys. I say the brain and the adrenal glands because the way your body processes and produces dopamine is quite complex, but it is primarily produced in the brain. Now, there is a spectrum here. If your dopamine levels are too low chronically, this is related to ADHD, Parkinson's disease, schizophrenia, depression, restless leg syndrome, and other disorders. Of course, there are other factors that contribute to those diseases. On the other end of the spectrum where your dopamine levels are too high, then we are talking about aggression, insomnia, low impulse control, a high sex drive, euphoria, and high energy. Then also on that far end, you could have mania, obesity, and addiction. Schizophrenia is sometimes on both ends of this spectrum. But here's the thing. Your dopamine levels are not really what determines these conditions. It's your dopamine receptors. So if you release a lot of dopamine, your dopamine receptors take up all the dopamine they need, then they down-regulate the rest of it. So what happens is everything you do after that down-regulation occurs is less pleasurable to you. Dopamine, in a nutshell, is the neurotransmitter that acts as the reward center for bodily functions. And overall, it really regulates your ability to do something or not to do something. But it is just a messenger that sends information across the brain and then to the body. So how does your body trigger its release? This is very important because many of you may not be aware of the things that actually trigger that release. For example, dopamine doesn't hit the highest when you get the reward. It hits the highest when you are anticipating the reward. Actually, uncertainty, not knowing if you are going to get the reward or not, creates a much stronger hit, a much higher spike than having certainty that you will be rewarded for doing something. You see? Now, as human beings, we have this innate desire for connecting with other human beings. And that driving force is dopamine. So when someone likes us, our bodies release dopamine. When someone props us up or massages our ego, we have a dopamine release. When someone agrees with us, we have a dopamine release. When we are feeling the same emotions as someone near us, whether they are feeling good or bad emotions, we have a dopamine release. This is why people like watching reactions. This is why people like reaction videos. They want to see someone react the way they reacted. It's one of the reasons people like to share certain reels, clips, TikTok videos, and the like. Remember, one of the main triggers of dopamine release is anticipation. We get dopamine release from sex, shopping, watching a movie, listening to music, smelling something good cooking in the air, It is the cycle of motivation, reward, and reinforcement. And so anything that would have you expecting a reward would release dopamine. This is what's happening. Excessive use of social media is depleting people of dopamine to the point where they are locked into a chronic deficit due to that down regulation, and therefore are always tired, depressed, stressed, lacking motivation and drive, sudden memory loss, and all the things associated with dopamine depletion, or should I say the constant triggering of dopamine release is exhausting our dopamine receptors, and our receptors are tired. And this leads to addictions because people can't get that same high from just normal activities because they used it all on social media. They end up with mood issues, resting tremors, depression. On top of that, too much caffeine will lower your dopamine and exhaust your adrenal glands. So you have two issues with caffeine. Alcohol will lower your levels. Drugs, sugar, not being able to properly digest your food is major because then you are also low on other neurotransmitters. So your digestion needs to be working properly. Too little stomach acid could be the cause of that. Every time your phone sends you a notification and you hear that sound, that triggers the release of dopamine. Every time you put up a post, upload a video, get a like, gain followers, even when you make a comment on someone else's video, you can get that dopamine hit. But it's about the anticipation. You get that rush and the heart starts beating while the phone is ringing. Your heart starts racing while you are writing that comment. Anticipation of that reward that you may or may not get. Now, if your dopamine levels are low, you can up your dopamine levels with foods that are rich in tyrosine, chicken, turkey, fish, peanuts, almonds, avocados, bananas, milk, cheese, yogurt, cottage cheese, lima beans, pumpkin seeds, and sesame seeds. Soy, although I don't really recommend consuming soy, you can consume more threonine, which comes from beef, lamb, collagen, pork if you eat pork, cheese, gelatin, and you can get it from tofu, sunflower seeds, flax seeds, almonds, lentils, pistachio nuts, cashews. You can also supplement with vitamin D and vitamins B6 and B5, which are crucial for your body to produce dopamine. Exercise is also a great way to up your levels of dopamine. But like I said, even if you have high levels of dopamine, if your dopamine receptors are worn out, nothing is really going to get you out of that slump until you start cutting out all the excess stimulation. Now, some people recommend a dopamine detox or fast, which can be hard to do considering the extremes you would have to go through to cut off all the extra stimulation. Because dopamine is good, we need it to do things. It's just that we shouldn't be using it all up on social media and things like that. This is why people are becoming so introverted. They don't want to talk to anyone or deal with anyone or be around anyone. People barely have the energy or attention span to send a text message anymore. This is what people feel like when they are addicted to porn. This is what they feel like when they are addicted to certain drugs. Understand, folks, that this mass dopamine depletion, it seems that big tech wants everyone to be depleted of dopamine and zombified. It's by design. It just makes it a whole lot easier for them to control you. Well, that's all for now. I do, however, want to come back to this topic as I believe there is much more to discuss about it. So stay tuned for that. But until next time, be sure to visit woodwardentertainment.com and the Woodward Entertainment Store. You can follow me on Instagram at JAEWoodward. Everyone have a great day, and hopefully after we continue to learn more of this information, we'll have even better days ahead. Stay awake, stay aware, stay safe, folks, and I'll talk to you all soon.